Hello everyone, welcome to the 2017 Rectorial Hustings. Over the next couple of hours, we're going to have the opportunity to hear from candidates and representative speakers regarding what they would hope to achieve if they are elected as our next University Rector, and we will also be taking questions from the audience over the course of the evening. There is further a hashtag throughout this election process if you wish to get involved via Twitter, so it's GU Rector Elections 17. And we would also request that all phones are kept on silent throughout this event. The University of Glasgow is one of 5 universities in Scotland to elect a rector. Our current rector, Edward Snowden, will see his term end in April of this year. The term of office for the rector at the university lasts for 3 years. The role of the rector is to take forward the views of students throughout the year right up to the highest levels within the institution, the university's governing body, University Court. The rector is further expected to express the concerns of students to the university's management. With current initial and external challenges, our next rector will face quite a number ahead. These include potential for increasing fees, changes in higher education policy, and wider uncertainty pertaining to the volatile political environment. This particular rectorial and election cycle has been nothing short of colourful. The initial call for nominations at the end of last year saw no candidates put forward at the end of January. Following the nomination process being reopened after agreement from University Court, with close at the recent deadline, we saw 12 candidates with confirmed nominations put forward. During the following nominations closing, we have since seen 2 candidates withdraw from the process, Graham Eddowes and Dr. Leif Azarpadi. This evening, we will hear each a short speech from candidates or representative speakers outlining ambitions and motivations in putting themselves forward for this very prestigious role. Our rectorial candidates for 2017 are as follows: Amir Anwar, Grace Belden, Sir Vince Cable, Lady Cosgrove, Thomas Hind, John Lindberg, Duncan Logie, Professor Jordan Peterson, Jonathan Teese, and Milo Yiannopoulos. The structure of this evening's hustings ceremony will be as follows. Each of our candidates will come on stage and deliver a short speech around their objectives if they're to be elected, and will also outline any further points. Now to commence with this evening's hustings, I will invite our first candidate up to the stage. Please offer a warm welcome to Amir Anwar.
Thank you, Amr, and thank you to the students. Now, every candidate claims they will be an active working rector. Now, I'm not a professor, I'm not a High Court judge, and I don't shoot fascists for a living, but I am the only one with nearly 3 decades dedicated to fighting inequality and injustice. My pledge of being an active rector is not an empty promise. Every day for the last 2 weeks, I've actually turned up to speak to students in the halls of residence, in the canteens, in their lectures, and for far too long, student unions at this university have been played off against each other for budgets. Student societies survive on crumbs while cutbacks have taken place, and the students need a rector to fight their corner. If elected, I have already pledged to hold surgeries every fortnight on campus. My manifesto touches on the issues as follows: rent. Choosing between food and rent whilst trying to study and work is a harsh reality for many students. West End rents are rocketing by 10% every year, increasing insecurity and poverty levels. My first step will be to convince the government to give effect to the Private Housing Tenancies Act passed by the Parliament last year, and then to provide evidence to Glasgow City Council to lobby the government and designate the West End as a rent pressure zone in one stroke, protecting students from rent poverty as well as evictions by unscrupulous landlords. Brexit. Brexit will increase hostility to foreigners and uncertainty over European Union student futures. Post-Brexit, students can guarantee one thing, that they are at the back of the queue in negotiations. I will work to highlight those concerns, whether at the UK or Scottish Government level. On the question of mental health, the number of students receiving mental health provision has soared by 50% over a 5-year period, increasing pressure on university services to breaking point, and in the worst case scenario, some students have taken their own lives. Let me say this: no student should be left to suffer in silence at this university, and it's time that the services receive the funding and support that they deserve. And I want to finish by saying this: I am proud of being a graduate at this university. It made me who I am. In 1991, 25 years ago, I led an occupation of the principal's office just around the corner. On that evening, I went out fly posting in Ashton Lane. I was chased, I was grabbed from behind, and I shouted, "All right, I've stopped." My head was pulled back. My face was smashed off the concrete, my teeth crumbled, my face was smashed again, and I passed out, and I was dragged back into the lane by 2 police officers. Terrified, I remember asking the question why, and I was told that this is what happens to black boys with big mouths, as I was kicked in the stomach, and I thought I was going to die that night. I screamed for help, the police panicked, they dumped me in the hospital, 3 teeth smashed out, unable to walk for a week, and in the 4 years that followed, I became a full-time campaigner and pursued a civil action against the police. I was arrested some 6 times in those 4 years, went to court 5 times, attempted arrest some 25 times. I learnt what it meant to be a victim and at the mercy of the establishment. And in 1995, I made legal history by winning my civil action. And there was 2 lessons that were learnt that night. The first lesson was learnt by the police, and that was that this black boy's big mouth just got bigger as the years went by. And the second lesson was learnt by me, and that is this, that freedom and justice is not handed to you on a plate. We have always had to fight for freedom and justice. And what I'll say to you is this to close, is if you elect me, then I can promise you one thing, you will finally have a rector who will fight for you, the students, and also our university. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amr. We'll now hear from our next speaker. So we have a representative this evening speaking for rectorial candidate Grace Belden.
I am here to read a statement on behalf of Grace Belden. He sends his apologies, but he is currently on the front line in Syria and so is otherwise occupied. The revolution in Rojava is one of the few bright spots in an increasingly bleak world. The Kurds are not only fighting and beating ISIS, they are creating a democratic and egalitarian society in their wake. Grace Belden is a volunteer fighter who is risking his life for his internationalist and socialist ideals. As Turkey is poised to enter the war against the Kurds, solidarity is more necessary than ever. Let's elect a rector in line with the best of Glasgow University traditions and show that this student body stands against fascism in all its forms. No doubt people will say that we need a working rector, but even with all the will in the world, a rector can do nothing that an organized student body can't do better. Student-led campaigns like the fossil fuel divestment campaign show us how we can win. The very limited influence the rector has is precisely why students have used previous elections to show support for the anti-apartheid movement, against nuclear proliferation, and in support of the right to privacy. If you want to save the QMU, get organized. If you want rent caps, get organized. If you want functioning mental health services, organize. Because even the best intentioned figurehead can't do this. Send the strongest possible anti-fascist message. Show solidarity with those fighting ISIS and working to end the refugee crisis, not just ameliorate it. Vote Grace Belden.
Thank you very much. We'll now hear from our next candidate. Please we'll offer a warm welcome to Sir Vince Cable.
Thank you for your welcome. I see this as an extremely important role, and I will take it very seriously. There are, in my experience, 2 types of rectors. There's the one you've just had, Edward Snowden, in the past, Winnie Mandela, others who were a political statement and were not here. But you've had others, Jimmy Reid, who was my contemporary, who was Glasgow shipyard workers, Charles Kennedy, who was my political mentor, who did take the job seriously, who worked for the students. And that's the role model that I would adopt. And I see my role as being here for the court, but also having regular advice surgeries based on what I did as an MP, having regular consultations, town hall meetings online, getting a proper sense of what matters to you. But I think it isn't just a question of having commitment, it's also having credibility. One has to engage with the court, with the university authorities, be taken seriously. I think I could claim to do that. I am a graduate of this university, postgraduate. I taught here for 6 years, economics. And I've been, of course, at a national level, Secretary of State. I had overall responsibility for universities and for research funding. But I know that there are some very particular preoccupations you have, and I made 3 practical commitments in my manifesto that I would take seriously and try to follow through. The first was built around the theme of gender equality, something I tried to do in government, but one of the big problems with university campuses is the massive underrepresentation of women in science and engineering, and that's got to be addressed. I would want the university to be much more proactive with STEM ambassadors, engaging with local schools and trying to rectify that and being the leader of the pack. I know there is a problem here with mental health. You're well down the national rankings in terms of services. The funding is derisory. It needs to be beefed up. There needs to be a proper preventive program with a buddy system, for example, to help people before they get to the stage of chronic illness. And the other issue, which is a necessary consequence of an expanding university, is the pressure on study space, the pressure on student accommodation, which of course is reflected in rents. So student accommodation, study space have got to be at the heart of this very ambitious university expansion plan, which is lined up, and also something where I think we should be looking for active collaboration with the city. I was a city councillor here years back, and I'm used to working with the civic authorities. I'll just make one final point. These are very specific issues which I would put at the centre of what I'm trying to do, but I'm also aware of the wider context. Brexit, if it happens, probably will do terrible damage to universities. You need a rector who will speak up for the university and for you on those big issues. One of the themes in my 5 years in government was fighting with Theresa May about overseas students, whose importance she just refused to recognise. And I've engaged directly on that subject, got concessions out of it, and I know the importance of the issue. But just pulling these threads together, I recognise the importance of the job. You do need a working rector, but somebody also who can convince the court and the authorities and work with you. Thank you very much.
And we'll now hear from a representative speaking on behalf of Lady Cosgrove.
Good evening, I'm Erin Ross and I'm here to speak in a personal capacity on behalf of Lady Cosgrove and her campaign team. Lady Hazel Cosgrove graduated from the University of Glasgow in 1966. She went on to pursue an illustrious career of legal firsts. First female sheriff in Glasgow, the first female senator of the College of Justice, and the first female to be appointed to the inner house of the Court of Session. She now seeks to add another first to her repertoire, the first active female rector of her alma mater. Lady Cosgrove has 5 key pledges: to ensure gender equality on campus. The university is taking great leaps in securing gender equality, but the work is far from done. Lady Cosgrove would seek to work with the university's Gender Equality Steering Group and to promote equality within the university at all levels. To improve student employability by mobilising the alumni network across all 4 colleges, Lady Cosgrove would work with the Careers Service and Alumni Office to promote the network, which is the university's employment-orientated social networking site. To promote the use of sustainable fuels and materials at the university, Lady Cosgrove is supportive of the university's pledge to divest from fossil fuels. However, she understands this is not an instantaneous process. As rector, she would seek to ensure that the university adheres to its promise to fully divest and to catalyse this process by exerting pressure where appropriate. To increase the volume of study spaces available to students, the university is entering an exciting phase of campus redevelopment. Lady Cosgrove is really well placed to oversee this development and to ensure that the student voice is heard throughout. A key priority should be the expansion of student study facilities on campus. To advocate for the rights of student refugees and asylum seekers, as a grandchild of immigrants who sought refuge in Scotland, Lady Cosgrove shall fiercely defend the rights of student refugees and asylum seekers. She shall seek to ensure that good quality advice, support and guidance is at the disposal of these students. As a former chair of the Mental Welfare Commission, she is well placed to advise the university on how its mental health services be improved and to advocate on students' behalf. Finally, as a progressive and inclusive candidate, Lady Cosgrove will strive to ensure the protection of diversity and tolerance on campus, something she feels particularly strongly about. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Representative Speaker for Thomas Hind.
Hello there. I'm a representative for Thomas Hind. Now, Thomas couldn't be here tonight because he's fighting ISIS. Wait, wrong candidate. He's actually not here because he's leading his legion of modern-day Nazi. Wait, that's two of the wrong candidates. He's actually not here because of commitments to charity work, because it turns out he's actually just a really nice guy. So, Glasgow needs an active rector, and that's something that all of us can agree on. And I will certainly be an active rector. None of the other candidates have pledged to be anywhere near as active as I have. I have committed to working every single day to meet the promises in my manifesto, a lot of which involves calling Milo Yidopodops a ball bag on Twitter, which I've been doing during the campaign, and I'm beginning as I mean to go on. I'm not going to make unrealistic promises like some of the other candidates will. The rector can only do so much. I'm not a superhero. I can't fly, shoot lasers out of my eyes at ISIS, or control rents in the West End. What you hear from me is what you get from me, and that is a clear commitment to being an active rector who is a passionate advocate for the benefit to the student body. What I can promise is that under my rectorship, the campus will be a safe place for all, and I will fight to end sexual harassment of all kinds. I will stop the use of non-disclosure agreements and sexual harassment settlements with the university, which I think are highly damaging to the credibility of the university's stated drive against sexual harassment. I will also campaign to improve mental health services for students. There are already some fantastic services, some of which are underused, so the first thing I will be doing will be raising awareness of existing services and access to them. A 10-week wait for a counsellor is far too long. I'll be a rector who listens to students, echoes their concerns, and fights against injustice, against inequality, and against ball bags everywhere. I promise that once elected, I will read all of the other candidates' manifestos and steal their best ideas. Something that can't be done to me because I'm not going to let the other ones see my manifesto. And most of it's about nachos. Now, before my final words, I'd like to thank Ryan for standing in for me. He's from the university's Comedy Society Glass. Oh, Thomas, you shouldn't have. He's been taking time out of his rehearsal schedule for the show Glass are doing at the QMU immediately following this tonight in order to support me. Thank you. He's not only a minister, he's a saint as well. In summary, I will stand up and be a strong voice for students. As a recent graduate, I'm attuned to the needs of the student body. Not only that, but I am now legally ordained a minister. And as rector, I promise to be available to perform wedding ceremonies for any and all students, staff and alumni. So vote Hind if you want the greatest rector ever and one who will ensure that never again are we subjugated to below-par nachos on campus. And that being a ball bag is something that is no longer tolerated here at this great university of ours. And as Amir was saying, if you want to get involved, you can, on Twitter, you can go #GetBehindTheHind, or if you'd like to support or hate for other candidates because they're ball bags, you can go with #NotMyBallBag. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now moving on to our next speaker, and we're going to be hearing from a representative speaking on behalf of John Lindberg.
Hello everyone, so I'm called Cameron and I'm speaking for John tonight. Now John, for those of you who don't know, he graduated Glasgow University last year and is now working on a postgraduate in London on energy and climate change. Now while he was at university, he worked in the Scottish Parliament and the European Parliament through an advisory capacity and also through work on climate change. And through speaking to current students at the university and also using his current experience of students, he has built this manifesto, which I'm going to summarize for you on his behalf just now. So there's three main points that John has in his manifesto. The first is student services, fees and redevelopment, and outreach. So looking at student services, he's really committed to looking at mental health, not just giving money to the mental health department here at Glasgow, but looking to survey it, see what's working, and seeing what can be done to improve it. And also he's looking at supporting EU students. Being an EU student himself from Sweden, he is fully aware of the impact that things like Brexit can have on them, as he's currently facing those issues himself. So he's kind of got first-hand experience of how he could put things in place to support those students. Looking to fees and redevelopment, John's he's been discussing a lot recently how in May this year could be a vote to increase fees for non-Scottish students in the UK by roughly about £10,000, and he's committed to making sure that doesn't happen, doing all of his power he could. As rector, he's also really keen to support the redevelopment of the university. So a lot of the students at the university just now, I suppose, won't see the final product, but they will see all of the development works of the development project, so he's keen to make sure that no one is disadvantaged by that and to support people. Finally, his point is outreach. So he's keen to set up a fund called the Rectorial Engagement Fund to give undergraduate and non-PhD students funding for their student projects to further engage them with the community. And he's also keen to set up opportunities for internships as accredited modules for your course. Through doing all of this, he'll have weekly Skype sessions and bring in the Dumfries campus. He'll meet with all the student union leaders and also the student societies and give regular updates to everything. Now, John, working on climate change currently, he's very keen to support environmental issues through this, and that'll be done through supporting students who do good things, such as the work of the Glasgow University Environmental Sustainability Team, through funding, and looking at making the university more transparent in its energy usage. So finally, to summarise, John wants to use student services, fees and redevelopment, and outreach as ways he can improve the university and look for opportunities to development through being an involved, transparent, and an experienced rector. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much. So moving on, we'll now be hearing from rectorial candidate. Please offer a warm welcome to Duncan Logie.
Good evening. My name is Duncan Logie, and I graduated in the summer of 2016. I studied theology and politics here at the university, and I now work at a church in Edinburgh as a youth worker. At university, I tried to spread myself as far as I could and experience all that I can here. That meant that I did athletics, I played on the football team, I did debating, I got involved in activism on campus, and I volunteered at a night shelter for destitute asylum seekers off campus. I tried to experience all that I can in this new country that I call home now. I think that our rector is somebody who deeply knows what the student experience is like, and I am the candidate that knows that, because I've spent the past 4 years here living and breathing Glasgow University. I'll show up at every single university court meeting and fight for the students. And I'll be on campus twice a month for surgeries and once a month in Dumfries so that students there also feel like they're being represented. I'll also be happy to be to go along with any campaigns that students are doing and make sure that our unions are well equipped to create the best possible experience for students. I want to be an active and committed rector for the University of Glasgow. I also want to fight for students who have to pay tuition fees. I had to pay tuition fees as an international student, and they've at least doubled since I started at university. I've also vowed to lobby the United Kingdom, the UK government, to reduce fees for English students. I'm going to use the office of the rector and the power that holds to lobby our elected officials to actually represent the students who really need that support. I'm happy to work alongside other groups like the NUS and other rectors in Scotland to add full support to this campaign to reduce tuition fees for English students. I also want to focus my 3 rectoral years on current students during the campus redevelopment. We all know that the university library took forever to be refurbished. It was late. Same thing with the gym and the Hive extension. I want to make sure that all facilities that the university offers to students during their time here are up to snuff. that they're good enough for students who devote so much time and effort to their studies here. I want you to vote for me because I am accessible. I'm somebody who will be on campus, who you can talk to, who has lived what you lived for the past 4 years. And I'd like to help make your time here the best. Vote for Duncan Logie. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So next we're going to hear from a representative speaker speaking on behalf of candidate Jordan Peterson.
Well, hi everyone. If you want to hear a statement from Jordan himself, there will be a video posted online, and Jordan gives a small sort of talk on why he believes personally he should be rector. But I just want to talk about a few of the reason, like what a vote for Jordan would mean. First of all, it'd be a symbolic vote as for a candidate that supports free speech and free expression. I think if you look across universities across the Western world in recent years, you've been seeing this push against students being able to express themselves and say what they want, and it's probably maybe even shown here where if you even nominate a candidate, there'll be a petition to have you removed, etc. And I think it's also is a part of it seems that in universities there'll be a vocal minority who believes that it's their views that should be heard, no one else's. So we think a vote for Jordan would be a sort of pushback against that. Anyway, so we're going on to what Jordan can actually do for you as rector. It's really about mental health issues. Jordan he's a psychologist, and he's worked with students, but also people from all walks of life, battling depression, schizophrenia, and he's also developed like sort of simple programs for people to deal with anxiety, and you can access these right now. But if Jordan was to become rector, he would want to develop a program for students at the University of Glasgow. That'd be a program for all students, because I think right now when we talk about mental health issues, these can just be for extreme cases, and this can be very expensive, and it's very difficult to build up a lot of capacity. It's very difficult to get one person to see every single person as a mental health issue. So if Jordan was able to develop a system that all students get access, and this would be particularly good for students who may have issues, may have anxiety, but they're not the kind of person who wants to come forward and talk to someone about their anxiety. This would be really great for them. And I'd also just want to go and just start talking about what Jordan said in his own statement that you'll be able to see later today, is that he just wants to emphasize that he is a person he's spent his life listening to people and dealing with their concerns for the best part of 20 years. So, and now with modern technology, he would easily be able to do that as a rector, who may not be here all the time, but he would still be very active. So, yeah, thanks.
So thank you very much. So we're now going to hear a speech from our next candidate. So can you please offer a warm welcome to Jonathan Teese.
Hi, I've never done a speech like this before, but according to Google, to start a campaign speech, you need either thoughtful silence or shocking anecdote to catch the audience's attention. Now, I can't be bothered with thoughtful silence, so I'm going to give you a shocking anecdote. I have quite a bad wheat intolerance, and a few weeks ago I went out with a few pals, and after a few drinks, I stupidly decided to start drinking beer. And on the walk home, along Great Western Road, at the age of 22 years and 8 months, I shat myself. Now, I'm not sure if that is an anecdote, but I hope I've caught your attention for the next 3 minutes. My name is JJ Teese, and I graduated from the university last summer with a 2-2 in history, which means two things. Firstly, my employment prospects are extremely grim and I have a lot of spare time, meaning I spend my days taking BuzzFeed quizzes that reveal my favourite sex position based on what cheese I like, and my evenings desperately swiping right on Tinder for hours to get laid. Secondly, as a graduate, it means I can take this opportunity to say a warm thank you to Sir Vince Cable, who was kind enough to support the tripling of tuition fees, which means students across the country, like myself, will spend the rest of my life paying off education fees. So thank you, Vince. At the end. Now, I don't stand here pretending that I have the same political acumen as some of the other candidates. I'm not the first female to be appointed to the Court of Session, clearly. I'm not a respected and successful civil rights lawyer, and I've never been a member of the Cabinet, though if I had been, I'm sure I would, like Sir Cable, charge £10 for students to come and meet me for my manifesto launch. But what I do bring is an immediate experience of the problems facing students currently, the failures of university management to fix these problems over several years, and a heartfelt passion to improve the university experience for current and future students. And though I have run a jokey campaign, my manifesto is completely serious. Firstly, I want to improve the failing mental health services at this university. The staff who work at our counselling service are absolutely fantastic, but they are underfunded and overstretched, and I will urgently seek to improve funding and the advertisement of services such as Nightline. Secondly, I will improve funding to our 2 student unions. Our student unions are unique to this university and should be protected. They are places where students can participate in debating or activism, social hubs where people can make and meet friends, and buildings where you can find in the most unusual places people doing things normally considered more appropriate in the bedroom. The university is allowing one of our unions to struggle financially, damaging its services and reputation. This is simply not good enough. Gooster does incredible work on this campus, and the gym modernisation is fantastic, but it's worrying that gym fees are rising and the gym may be unattainable for some future students. I will push for a freeze on gym fees and to have a definite confirmation that Wednesday afternoons will be free for sport, as it is in most universities across this country. Fourthly, I'll be a rector who will support student campaigns and activism to make a safer and more equal campus, and will lobby for a space to be made on campus for students to go after nights out to safely call a taxi or get in contact with friends. And finally, I will fight wholeheartedly against any attempts to raise tuition fees for future students, push for more gender-neutral facilities on campus, begin a campaign to get reduced price or free sanitary products on campus, improve social media presence of the rector, and develop free Chip Fridays. The Glasgow Guardian wrote a well-nice analysis of my manifesto, which I was quite surprised about, as they're usually quite brutal, but rightfully picks up on how I've financed this, and I'm very happy to go into this in the question and answer, but I will say right now that we are one of the wealthiest universities in the United Kingdom, and we shouldn't be fooled into thinking that we don't have enough money to spare for these services. Finally, I would like to briefly touch upon the disappointing nomination of Mino Yiannopoulos as rector. A fellow nominee calls him a ball bag, but I think as university students and graduates, that is beneath us. He is not a ball bag, he is a bellend. His disgusting views have no place on our campus where we embrace tolerance and diversity. I strongly believe the next rector of Glasgow University should be a recent graduate. Please vote JTCs for rector.
Okay, so thank you very much. So to give an update, our last candidate of the evening, Milo Yiannopoulos, has expressed apologies that he will not be able to attend this evening, and we've just been updated that there will apparently be a Q&A at some point over the next week. So, leading on to that, we are going to move forward this evening by asking all candidates to please come on stage, and we will be taking some questions from the audience. So up first, we're going to be taking a couple of questions from the audience for candidate Amir Anwar. So could I have a show of hands, please? So we'll take our first question just down at the front, just here.
Hello, I'm Kate. I'm Kate. I'm going to be the next president of the SRC, and next year as rector, you'll be working with the students' representative body. Not just yourself. No one actually mentioned the SRC tonight. And I was interested how you will make sure that the views of the representative body are kind of presented at court and not just the views of a select number of students.
Working? Yes. No, it's a good question. What I did say was that I don't think the views of the student unions, I don't think the views of the Student Representative Council have been taken on board because of the lack of an active working rector over the course of the last 3 years. I believe that when I walked into this university, I was actually shocked to see the state of the John McIntyre, to see the state of some parts of the GU and especially of the QM union. And I think that both associations, student societies, everybody is being played off against each other. And what you actually need is a rector that's going to pressurize the university. But I'd say this, at the end of the day, whoever you elect from here, the rector is only going to be as good as the students and the Student Representative Council if they back him or her up. And I think that the university does have money because they're spending £1 billion over the course of the next 10 years. So they clearly have funds and money. And when I see the state of the University Guardian, when I see the state of the Gust building, when I see the state of the John McIntyre, and I look at the student unions, they should be the jewels of the crown at this university. It's not just simply a case of building study places or building new fancy lecture theatres. It's also the case of the facilities that the students use. If you want to be a world-class leader in terms of universities, then you need to listen to the students, and it needs to be an equal partnership and a working relationship. And up until now, there has not been one. It's almost as though it's been a top-down situation, and what I'd be saying is I would be seeking help from all the students on this campus, and of course the SRC, who represent all students, and take them with me to speak to the university. It's about time this was an equal partnership and students were stopped being treated as commodities or cash cows when it comes to rent, when it comes to any other facility or issue that they're required. It's about time they started treating them as the fact that it's students. Students are the reason that this university exists and has proud traditions. We have two fantastic student unions. We have an SRC that has a rich history, and I'm drawing a line in the sand, a red line, that if there's any talk of amalgamation of both student unions, and the fact that £5,300 go down every year, that you have a principal that earns, or a vice-chancellor that earns £276,000, which is more than the student unions receive, or the fact that each year the SRC grant seems to go down, and then you're forced to fight out who's going to receive what sort of funding. Student associations, student groups and societies are getting just crumbs off the table. When I speak to the sub-city today and they tell me they get hardly any money, speak to other societies, they get £2,000 a year, Glasgow University Guardian, and quite honestly, it's not good enough. And it's about time that the university started realising that the SRC and student unions should be listened to.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll take one question just up at the back, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anwar, for your passion. It might have been that passion that simply clouded my hearing, but could you please, in just a few sentences, outline any specific measures that you would take as a rector? Because you have highlighted a lot of very important issues, but I have not heard a specific way of how you would go about solving them. Thank you.
With respect, maybe you were in a different hall tonight. I specified, first of all, rent. I think I'm the only candidate that specified the Private Housing Tenancy Scotland Act 2016. First step will be to get the Scottish Government to implement it. The second step would then to be lobby the Glasgow City Council with evidence taken from students to tell them about the fact that unscrupulous landlords are rocketing the rents up by 10% a year. That would create a rent pressure zone, the first one in Scotland. That would mean that students will be protected, but not just students on campus. The second issue that shocks me is the fact that private landlords or private property markets landlords are coming in and buying up huge tracts of land on this in Glasgow. And what they're doing is they're exploiting international students. They're having market rents that are way beyond market rents, sometimes 600, 700, 800 pounds, when the average rent is about 400 pounds a month. And what it's doing is segregating international students from the local students. I believe in student housing operating with co-ops. That's one of the issues. The question of mental health provision, well, I've said it. The university has money. It needs to start transferring money. One suicide is not good enough. No student should be left to suffer in silence. £10,000 given to the Student Representative Council to assist with suicide prevention, quite honestly, is not good enough. When the principal of this university can spend several £1,000s on trips to Singapore, or staying in the Ritz-Carlton, or spending £2 expenses on, water bottles. What the students require is access to facilities and good access to facilities. £1 billion over 10 years, I'm sure some money could be diverted to the facilities that students require. I've listed it, it's in the manifesto if you read it, but clearly it's a manifesto and I've only got 1 minute to talk. But if you give me a chance over 3 years, you will get list after list, and the real key to this will be an open door policy where students across campus are able to come to a rector and speak to them and to tell the rector exactly what the problems are that they're experiencing, not just in big halls like this, but also on one-to-one situations. And the students, I've met thousands of students in the last 2 weeks, and the manifesto, I couldn't write a full book, but I'm actually quite shocked and sad to see the state of this university when it comes to student facilities and the problems that they're suffering, and I think that those are the ones that need to be highlighted.
Okay, thank you very much. We're now going to be hearing a couple of questions for rectorial candidate Sir Vince Cable. So could we have a show of hands from the audience, please? So just second row at the front here.
Some say you are the most qualified candidate to speak on Brexit. So despite all of his faults, our principal, Anton Muscatelli, has been getting pretty involved in making sure that Glasgow University, a university I and many are proud are so international, has a voice when it comes to our relationship with Europe and with Brexit. So whether it be in a UK context or a context of an independent Scotland and the risks of continued involvement with Europe, how could, as a rector, you facilitate a strong student voice to make sure that we maintain close relations with Europe?
Thank you. I'll stand up because I can't see the people at the back. I mean, my first preoccupation would be with the very specific issues around the university that I made clear. But I think you're right that on the big issues that affect you, and I mean, your generation are effectively going to be blighted by the consequences of Brexit. You know, we need to have a student voice. Now, there are several ways in which universities are going to be damaged seriously by Brexit. One of them is that, I think in Scotland, it's something of the order of 15 to 20% of the staff come from the European Union. Their position is insecure. We've got a substantial number of European Union students who come here, who are valuable, who contribute. Their future is highly uncertain. This is a very good research university with Edinburgh, one of the two leading research universities in Scotland. Their future is very much disadvantaged because of the loss of Horizon funding. There is a collective approach to research in Europe, and Britain derives substantial net benefit from it. So the kind of things that, where Glasgow is leading the world, like stratified medicine, the contribution we get from the European Union is in danger of being lost. And then there is the Erasmus program, which is something that many of you could potentially benefit from. The exchange scheme, the future of that is in great doubt. So, I mean, there are some really big practical issues affecting universities, and I think your rector has to be in there, in the national debate at Scottish and UK level, arguing the case, because it's very clear from the last few days that the UK government really hasn't a clue. They haven't got any plans for crashing out of the European Union, and the consequences for you as individuals, as potential employees and as students and as part of this university are very, very serious.
Okay, we'll take a question just from the back row there. I will just ask again if you could try and keep answers. No, answers just a little bit shorter. Thank you.
I'm Andrew Tam, a PhD student in Theology and Religious Studies. There is a communist institution in the University of Glasgow who is always the enemy of freedom of speech and research and promote communist propaganda in the name of Chinese language education. Its name is Hongji Hokyun, Confucius Institute, an institution directly governed by the Chinese government. Chicago has already shut down Confucius Institute, while the left here remains silent on the threat of communism in our campus, especially to the East Asian students like me. Will you ask the university to shut down Confucius Institute and establish the Department of East Asian Study so as to ensure that the East Asian Studies in this university is done in a proper and academic manner instead of a communist manner. Thank you.
I didn't fully hear that, but I think I heard about half of it. I think the importance of this is that Chinese students are now the biggest group of overseas students in the UK, and I think about 1,500 at Glasgow. I mean, it's very important for the, what worries me actually about the Chinese students in the UK is the lack of integration with the student body. I think we should be working much harder actually to get the students from China engaging with us and learning from them and making them feel welcome also. I think there are some tricky issues involved in dealing with China generally. I had 4 visits to China when I was Secretary of State. We have to promote, of course, our economic interests as a country, which include welcoming overseas students, but we also have our values. I always, when I went to China, I always made a point of speaking to people from the democratic movement, people who were discriminated against, homophilia, gay groups, and making it very clear that as a visiting minister, I respected the Chinese system, but I was willing to stand up for human rights as well. So given that the Chinese group within our university is so important here, I just want to make sure that your voice is heard and that we relate directly to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now going to be hearing from Erin, who will be taking questions on behalf of Lady Cosgrove. So could I have a show of hands, please? Okay, we'll take a question just here.
Thanks. One of Lady Cosgrove's pledges is to protect the rights of refugee and asylum seeker students. As a sitting judge, even on an ad hoc basis, her role is to interpret the law in an impartial and apolitical manner. In light of this professional requirement, how can she claim that she's free to act as an advocate for students who require political intervention, particularly when it comes to influencing policy against the Westminster government's current savage approach to accepting refugees and asylum seekers?
Oh, right, okay, there we go. Sorry. Thank you for your question. So in regards to defending and protecting the rights of refugees and asylum seekers in the context of her role as university rector, I think we need to take a look at what is offered. So we currently offer some refugee scholarships to the university, but these are not flexible. There's one per college, and they're actually not, they're currently not all taken up. So we'd look to redress that and look at where the refugee scholarships are more needed, basically. Okay, what did you ask?
I asked in light of her role as a judge, where she has to remain impartial and
Yeah.
what she can offer as an advocate for students.
Well, she won't be acting as a judge, she'll be acting as a rector, and she's fully committed to upholding and representing the needs of all students and the diversity of our student population. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll now take a question just from third from the back.
Hi. Do you think Lady Cosgrove's ties to Israel impinge on her ability to represent students from, say, Palestinian descent at this university?
As I am Lady Cosgrove's representative here and not Lady Cosgrove, I think the fairest thing to do on this issue is to read out the statement I have from her on this. Lady Cosgrove is an honorary patron of the Jewish National Fund UK. That's a charity. It has no political objectives. Its objectives are philanthropic and are for the benefit of all citizens of the State of Israel, regardless of creed, nationality, religion. The purpose of the charity is to support good causes in the State of Israel, to relieve poverty and advance health and education by supporting schools and hospitals. It's also independent from the Jewish National fund and hasn't funded it for 12 years. Hope that partially answers your question. That's all I'll say on that.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we're now going to be taking a couple of questions for Rectorial candidate Thomas Hind. So could I have a show of hands, please?
Is it working now?
Is it working now?
What?
Yes.
Ah, right, okay, great.
Okay.
Sorry.
So could I have
Well,
a
I've got an earpiece to Thomas so he can answer some questions directly, hence why I couldn't quite hear there.
Technically savvy. Okay,
Couldn't
we'll
Skype.
take one from the front row here.
Okay, so as Rector, you'll be tasked with representing and echoing the student voice in the highest level of university management. Given that the Rector must also echo the student opinion and student concerns, irrespective of their own personal beliefs, how will your candidate, ensure that they carry out this role effectively, even if they disagree or do not even share the same opinions on student issues, such as tuition fees, student welfare, and climate change?
Going to give Thomas a little bit to compensate for the delay on that one before he answers. Thomas, are you getting that? Okay. He would be a rector that stands up for everyone, regardless of their beliefs. Yes, Thomas? He'll crucially be a voice for the students and what they believe. And not promoting solely his own voice on things. Well, what he says may have his accent, which is quite different from mine. The crux of the content and the passion behind it will be that of the students. Also, you should go and see Ryan's show just after this. I didn't say that, Ryan. Stop making stuff up and just say what I'm saying to you. But seriously, it's 5-star stuff. 7:30 at the QM or whatever it is. You should have at least learned the time. Grand. Anything else you want to add, Thomas? I have to riff, so I'm just going to leave it there.
Okay.
Grand.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll take another question from the audience.
Please break it into as small parts as possible.
Can we have a show of hands? Anyone? Okay, we'll go to the front.
Cheers, thank you. So, whilst a very humorous campaign, do you not think
it's a very humorous campaign.
Do you not think that, to some extent, given that there are, as has been described, this has been a colourful campaign, that there are some very controversial candidates standing, that the university is investing £1 billion in the future, that there are an awful lot of very serious issues on campus with this university and in the student body? Do you not think that this, albeit humorous campaign, debases an ancient and very crucial role within this university, which is the chair, the governing body of an organisation that employs 6,000 staff, turns over £600 million a year, and has got 26,000 students?
Thank you, first of all, for saying he's funny. He thinks that humour, crucially, is a great way to engage students in the election. The only reason we're having this election in the first place was because the engagement was so low before that no one was even nominated. So while it is a serious position, and they would be a serious rector, we need a rector who's going to stand up to all of these other racist and fascist candidates. taken a while, isn't it? So can you give me that again, Thomas? Just as quickly as you possibly can.
Closing comments?
Grand. So he's going to work very hard to that, and he's also going to make the nachos great, is what he said. So is that all, Thomas? Yeah? It will be a serious rector. It does have serious policies and a serious commitment to the students of Glasgow and to the institution itself.
Okay, thank you very much. It's as if he was right in the room with us. Okay, now moving on to hear from our next candidate representative this evening. We'll be taking questions for the candidate for John Lindberg. So, can we pass the mic? So, do we have any questions for rectorial candidate John Lindberg? No? Last call for questions? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll now be taking questions for rectorial candidate Duncan Logie. Okay, so can we have a show of hands for any questions? Yep. Oh.
Hi, hey, maybe I'm just going to do a general statement. I think what we just saw with that kind of parody, it's actually a really important thing. I'm only here for 1 year, but I think it's actually really, really sad that there was nobody nominated. I mean, we live in, such complicated times, and we get the chance to do something like that, and then, nobody's nominated, and I think that is something really, really sad. But apart from that, I think one thing that's quite interesting, we've been talking about rents. And when you look through this city, the city has such amazing architecture. And then you see these big student halls being built everywhere. And I think for a rector, it might also be interesting to, actually try to, get the students to do more with this city, because Glasgow is an amazing city. And yeah, it might be quite interesting to know how you want to make sure that the city is actually, engaging with this university and vice versa.
Thank you for that question. I can say from personal experience last year, especially, I had a really shady landlord. Everything was in cash. It was a really not nice flat. If you put a football or something on the floor, it would definitely fall down pretty quickly because nothing was level. What I did when I found out about this, when I met this landlord in the middle of the night so that he could show me this flat, afterwards, sensing the kind of dodginess of the whole thing, I went to the SRC's advice center, and they informed me of my rights as a tenant and information about what I could do if I had any issues. Along the lines of liaising with the city council, there is a city councilor, a representative of the city council on the university court. And so that would be, I would definitely, as a rector, bring that issue up with the council representative on the university court when I'm at those meetings and around those times.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any further questions from the audience? No? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll now be taking some questions for rectorial candidate Professor Jordan Peterson, and we'll be hearing from his representative here this evening. So, do we have any questions for your candidate, Professor Jordan Peterson? Okay, we'll go fourth row here first.
I would like to ask Peterson. He's repeatedly said that he would not automatically respect students' pronouns like Z. I'm wondering, regarding his commitment on mental health, how he plans to make that coincide with his non-respect of some students' requirements. Because I'm not sure if he knows, but the impact on a trans person, on a non-binary person, that not using the right pronouns can have is enormous on their mental health. So I'm just wondering what kind of hypocrite he is. Thank you.
I think it's important to remember that when Peterson came out and spoke about gender-neutral pronouns, he was fundamentally criticising a law which is very imprecise and had no evidence that it would have the effects it desired. He's a mental health professional. He works with individuals, and he stressed that he would take the same approach as he has with that as the rector of the university. So that's not telling people what they should do, what political opinions they have. He thinks that the nominating the rector has become too politicized. He thinks he fundamentally is there to represent the students and to help the students grow and develop in themselves and form their own way of life and not impose his opinions on others.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll take a question just here in the left-hand column, third row.
Well, it's not so much a question, but I just want to refer to what she said. I think the main issue with Jordan Peterson is not that he's saying that he's not going to respect these people. He's saying that the policing of words is not right. And what he wants to say, basically, is you can ask nicely for these things, but you can't police words. And that's all he said, literally.
I'm sorry, but this university has a pronoun pledge and a policy that requires people to actually use the right pronoun. So I just
Thank you very much. Does the speaker have any response?
I don't know if any of you saw this, but there was a free speech protest soon after he released his initial videos on Bill C-16, in which he spoke to a number of University of Toronto students who had the same kind of questions and objections as you do. And he referred to the matter of respect as you don't demand respect, you act respectful and get treated with respect back. It's not a matter of just demanding. He said he would refer to people by their whatever pronouns they want, provided they aren't rude about it.
Okay, thank you very much. We will now hear from our next rectorial candidate. We'll hear some questions for candidate Jonathan Teese. So do we have any questions for Jonathan Teese? Okay, we'll go front row.
So you were a student for 4 years. Why should we take you seriously now?
Sorry, what was that?
You were a student for 4 years and you had an opportunity to become a student representative and fight for the issues of students. So why are you doing that now? Why should we take you seriously?
So I didn't stand for student politics during my time at university. I never kind of felt like it was something that I could contribute a lot to. I'm kind of one of those people where I'm like happy to support other people running for positions, but I'll kind of take a step back. But when I left university, after doing a bit of work in the West End and stuff like that, I've kind of looked back at the university and my experience at it and started seeing the exact problems that kind of made me have a bad experience maybe in my fourth year. Seen the same things being brought up for 4 years during my time at university, and then they're still being brought up in SRC elections now. So I thought I could take this opportunity to run for the rector position. Why you should take me seriously? That one's a bit more difficult. I think you should take me seriously because although I'm running a fun campaign, like I get the fact that people can see me as a joke candidate, that's completely acceptable. But my manifesto is completely serious. I think I'm potentially the most passionate candidate in terms of I actually want to make a change for the students. I'm not here because I want to wear like a gown and walk around the university. I'm not here for the 5 ceremonial dinners. I mean, like, it would be nice to have some hot meals in the year, because at the moment I can't afford gas in my flat. But I'm not here for that. I'm not here to be best pals with University Court. I'm here to actually stand up for students and then finally have a voice on the University Court saying, no, you can't keep treating the students like they're the second best in this university. You need to start listening to what they say, and you need to start taking direct action in terms of mental health, freezing gym fees, supporting both unions, improving facilities and stuff like that. Yeah, so take me seriously.
Okay, can we have a show of hands for any other questions? Okay, we'll take one just in there.
Hi there. Given that you just, in your opening speech, that you lied about Vince Cable, saying that people had to spend £10 to go and see him, that was actually untrue. It was a student-led society. Why should we trust you on your campaign promises if you're willing to lie to this hall?
It wasn't a lie at all, so I don't know. I know that you're his representative in the audience, so it's all right for you to stand up and say that. This man, I have nothing against Sir Vince Cable as a human being. He seems like a very stand-up gentleman. But I will not have him stand here and say that he's going to represent students on University Court when he supported tripling university fees. He's not going to stand up for stopping university fees being increased for future students. And in terms of this fact that you're saying I lied about it, no. He charged £13.30 at first for people to go to buy tickets. It then got reduced to £10, and only 40 out of 50 people actually bought tickets. So if you're going to talk about me lying, then you should talk about yourself, mate.
Okay, so thank you very much to all candidates. So moving forward, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and again, if you could try and limit it to a 1-minute response, but I'll take a response from each of you individually. So, could you please each outline one thing that you feel you could deliver to create positive change for the student community here at the university? So it's one specific thing.
Development that's taking place at this university. Now, if you consider the fact that the students have actually had no real voice in that development, I think it's important at this stage that students are more involved and that the rector should be involved with that. When you look at the fact that 2 levels of a library was 9 months overdue, there was no transparency upon it. It's got good bits of it, but when you consider the fact that the revolving door doesn't even work properly, and they have to open the side door, the fact that one of the lifts doesn't work properly, it doesn't lead much hope in the fact that £1 billion development over the course of the next 10 years. I'm also conscious of the fact that when you look at that £1 billion development, what about the vet school? What about Glasgow? What about Dumfries? It's about time this university started taking notice of students across this campus in other places as well. So I would say accountability, transparency, and real student involvement, not anonymous people who sit on behalf of student bodies with the principal, with the vice chancellors, with whoever they are, yet we never actually get any feedback. It's about time the university started giving regular feedbacks to the students at this university about exactly what is going on in order that students and their rector can actually hold them to account.
I agree about the massive importance of that development, but since Anna's mentioned it, I'll mention the other issue which I would focus on, which is the mental health issue. And I don't just do that because you've raised it as students. My own family life was blighted by mental health problems. I've seen it, and I've seen the destruction it causes unless you deal with it early and properly. And one of the things I was able to do as a Secretary of State in government was get money out of the Treasury to make sure that mental health was properly embedded in the institutions that I had responsibility for, such as adult colleges. And we're talking about small sums of money in relation to a potentially very large budget. And I think prioritizing that, arguing the case properly, I think one could really make a difference that would help lots of individuals.
Mr. Jordan Peterson is extremely interested in developing an online program available to all students, which is based on his development of the self-authoring program, which he's made with a number of other psychologists. This will be adapted to student needs and will be freely available to everyone. It's had amazing impacts when it's been tested out in universities in both Canada and Sweden, I believe. It's in a university in Canada, it prevented dropout rates in the first year of university when they're more common, like completely, and it increased the grades of failing students by 25%, and it was especially helpful for males of ethnic minority backgrounds. This would also include other helpful things for students to adjust to university life, living away from home for the first time, finances, and also a program which teaches you how to write university standard essays as well.
The role of rector is a part-time role, and so as a rector, I would be very keen, and it would be integral to my rectorship to work as much as I can with the SRC to be a united front on the court. A specific thing that will affect students most in the coming years is the redevelopment of the campus. And so I promise that I will work with the SRC, because this is a student issue, to work with the SRC for students to make sure that math building that they're putting up outside of the Adam Smith is good enough for students. I'll listen to students, and I'll work with the SRC for issues that are concerned with students, for issues that are concerned with everyone on campus life. I'll be sure to work with the entire university court and anybody I can.
So yeah, from John's perspective, one thing that he would do would be give an environmental focus. And that means throughout everything that he does and all the decisions he makes, he would make an environmental consideration. And that would kind of take two different streams. The first stream would be what environmental things can be done to protect the rights of the students in future in their careers, such as making funding available for environmental activities and things, and making sure that those with an environmental focus have a platform for that and to support on a big scale and represent the transparency of the university for environmental things. The second would be to make sure that student-led initiatives that support environmentalism, as an example I mentioned earlier, the Glasgow University Environmental Sustainability Team, and a lot of similar grassroots projects that students have started, he would make sure that they get the platform that they need to make every chance they can and support the great things coming out of students at the university.
There isn't just one change I'll make. There's so much that needs to be done that only one positive change itself would be a failure. I'll fight against sexual harassment and end non-disclosure agreements, make international students feel welcome, and call out ball bags everywhere. I'll also use my digital skills to provide new ways for students to interact with the rector and raise any issues they have. I'll be a rector for Glasgow that we can again be proud of, and honestly, I'll make the Nachos so much better too. And as promised, I will steal all of the best ideas from everyone else on this stage.
I think Lady Cosgrove represents equality in literally everything she's done and everything she wants to do for this university, particularly gender equality. She's been playing with the big boys all her life, and that's what she would do on court. I think she has the credible political sway that is needed to uphold this role. Particularly, she wants to work with the Gender Equality Steering Group, and a couple of key things she wants to do there are work on reducing the gender pay gap. According to a UCU report just from 2016 there, our female professors earn on average 93.2% of what our male professors do. That's not acceptable. That makes us the 25th worst higher education institution in the UK. There are barriers to the upper grades of university staff roles. That means there are no role models for our students. She wants to work on the gender action plan, which gets more of our students, female students, into engineering, into nursing. She wants to do that through outreach and support, and she wants to link in the network, the alumni network, in mobilising that. She's also best placed to take part in this very key moment for university's prevention and response to gender-based violence. She was the chair of the expert panel on sex offending, which literally improved the response of the UK government. She managed to remove force as a condition in gender-based violence, which, as you can imagine, was incredibly progressive, and that's the kind of progress we need now. What else should I say? She protects equality and inclusivity, freedom of speech. She's got the university connection. She's an alumna, a life member of the Queen Margaret Union back from when it was a same-sex union. She's lived through our history. She sat on the advisory commission to the Chancellor's Fund, so she's actively supported the student experience already. She knows senior management. She's a credible candidate.
I think the thing I'll be most passionate about if I'm voted rector is finally getting this university and the university management to start treating the students first rather than the university management being treated first and the students second. I think we need a university where the goals of my manifesto, such as improving mental health, the unions, the gym fees, these can all be achieved. We're one of the wealthiest universities in the United Kingdom. We're just about to do a £1 billion extension on campus. We've got a chancellor on a 6-figure salary. The reason that we don't have the money that they say is because it's not being used in the correct way. If we start getting the university court and the university management start spending money in the correct way, then we'll be able to afford all of these services that a lot of people have put in their manifestos. And the fact that most people who are running for rector have put mental health as their first or second point in their manifesto shows clearly that the university court needs to do something different. So I hope whoever is voted rector makes sure that that change happens. Thank you.
Okay, so could I ask each candidate to again quite briefly outline what do you anticipate will be the greatest challenge that our next university rector will face during their term?
Greatest challenge will be the question of funding for student unions, for the SRC, and for a variety of services that we've talked about, mental health and a lot of other things. It's trying to get the university convinced that they need to spend the money on the students and they need to spend them on the facility and they need to be targeted, and it's about time they started listening to the concerns of the students. I've said it time and time again, and others have said it too. Students are desperate for help. Students are desperate for change. They are impacted by increasing levels of poverty. They are impacted by increasing levels of mental health problems. So on that basis, I think the real challenge will be convincing the Senate, convincing the university that they need to put their hand in the pocket, because quite clearly, when they can spend hundreds of millions of pounds, they are able to do so when they need to. And the question, I suppose, is what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Well, the point is, I don't think student associations, unions, SRC, society should be played off against each other. They are a valuable part of this university. When I came to this university, it blew my mind away. But I came at a time when you had student grants, you had income support, you had all sorts of facilities that were available. Now it's increasingly tough for students to survive. Sometimes they're holding down one job, two jobs, they're traveling from their parents, they're traveling outside from the West End, and they have to spend money on books and accommodation and all sorts. And then they suffer as a result and suffer in silence. So I think the most important thing, the challenge will be, people have talked about student apathy. I think there are 26 to 30,000 students at this university. I think is mobilizing those students, being able to speak to them and actually realize that their voice can make a difference. And that voice can be the student rector, working alongside with the SRC and both student unions and all the clubs and societies on campus, and actually realizing that we can actually really make a change. I work on the principle that it doesn't matter how hard the establishment or the authorities stand against you. I know from one case, the Choker case, described as a Scottish Stephen Lawrence, 17 years ago at the start of a legal career, we were told we couldn't win. We fought for 17 years, and last October, finally the family got justice, and the killer of Surjit Singh Choker was locked up. What I would say in this situation is, if I'm elected, it's for 3 years. I think that there's monumental changes that can happen in this next space of the next 3 years, both at the Senate level, both at UK government level, and both at Scottish government level. But it will always require students to come on board. I think it's fantastic that the students have mobilized. Clearly there is a buzz around campus. People have turned up tonight, but it needs to carry on, and it needs to carry on a daily basis, and all the organizations need to work together.
I think the biggest challenge we face is that the era of big university expansion, universities bringing in lots of money, may be coming to an end. The Brexit phenomenon may send universities into a downward spiral. If the government drastically restricts overseas students, there will be less income. Unlike English universities, which now have a big source of payment from the graduate tax, the fee system, they don't have that in Scotland. So there were potentially enormous financial pressures here. And I think the role of the rector is to make absolutely sure that when those battles over resources are going to be fought, that the student interest is to the fore. I mean, it would be very easy for the university authorities to put students last and to see a deterioration in the quality of teaching and accommodation and the rest. And I would see my job primarily as sticking up for the students in what I think will become an increasingly difficult environment for universities.
I think one of the biggest challenges we face, and a challenge that has definitely brought a lot of people in support of Peterson, is a general sense on campus that there isn't very much tolerance and respect for a variety of opinions, and people feel within their seminars and within classes that they can't say their own opinion in case of any form of backlash, as has been seen in this process. I think that it's in our campaign, we faced a lot of difficulties trying to work with several university bodies which are claiming to represent the students, but have been unwilling to represent a significant number of students simply based on the fact that they have a different opinion than them. And I don't think that's acceptable, specifically in this kind of environment where you're supposed to be learning, sharing your ideas.
I think one of the biggest challenges that the rector is going to face in the next 3 years is keeping up the enthusiasm that this election period has brought, and making sure that most of the people on this stage are either candidates or representative of candidates for people running on a working platform, working rector platform. And so one of the biggest challenges is to make sure that in that promise to be a working rector and be on campus and listen to students, that a wide variety of students are heard, and it's not just the same people showing up to meetings, and making sure that if it does turn out to be like that, if it's just a couple people showing up to something, that things need to change, and the rector needs to find a better way to listen to more students. So it's keeping the engagement level up and being self-critical about how you run surgeries and interact with students on campus.
So one thing that John has talked about a lot is the difficulties that can arise in merging and integrating different bodies, such as that of the senior university management, that of the student bodies, and that of outside partners that could offer a lot of opportunities to students, such as people who could offer internships from the community and further community integration. And that's one of the big things that John's always said that could be a big challenge. However, the way he talks about it, and from his background, he has experience in working with governments and merging public and government opinion, and merging different groups within the university while he was here, and now merging government and universities in London. So I think John, from what his background, he has the potential to bring experience of merging these different bodies to address the challenge of integrative management of all issues, to make sure that students' views are represented on the highest and most diverse levels.
I think the biggest challenges for this rector's term in terms of issues are hard to predict. The whole point is obviously that the rector will take on the challenges particular to that generation of student. However, I think the biggest thing is maintaining the relationship as a conduit between the student body and senior management. I think ensuring that grassroots energy that's driven campaigning for increased funding to mental health, for example, is driven upwards to the highest levels and implemented. Our counselling and psychological services are being prioritised in the next budget round. What we need is an expert to advise on how to improve the services now to ensure that those funds are allocated properly. And with Lady Cosgrove's history as the Mental Welfare Commission's chairman, which monitors care, treatment, make sure it's meeting the needs and respecting the rights of the individuals who use it. There couldn't be a candidate better placed to ensure that change.
I think I agree with Mr. Anwar on the fact that finances are going to be one of the biggest challenges for the rector in the next 3 years. But I also think the unstable political climate is going to be a massive issue for whoever is the next rector. While we're going through Brexit, I think we need to make sure that we have a rector who stands up for EU students' rights, who stands up and makes sure that future EU students will be allowed to have the same rights that they currently have at this university. We've also just recently found out that there might be another Indy Ref in the next 2 or 3 years. We need to make sure that students on campus have all the available materials to make their own decision and make a correct decision in their minds. So I think political things will be important. I don't want to keep picking on Sir Cable, but he did call it a graduate tax, and it's not a graduate tax. Tuition fees are a graduate debt, and there's no way to justify tuition fee rises.
Thank you very much. Okay, and as a final question for myself, so services right across the university are now seeing cuts in funding and more funding available. If there was support or at least approval from the rector at some point during your term to see a particular service cut across the university, what service would it be?
I think I would have a look at expenses for vice-chancellors and trips to Singapore and the Ritz-Carlton and places like that, quite honestly, because when you see student services, when you see a drop in the ocean of £10,000 for suicide prevention, and then you see hotel bills for 7-night stays in the Ritz-Carlton, I think that's where I would be looking at. I think people, we always get told, and I know that from the working world, always the poorest are always told to tighten their belt, while those at the top don't appear to tighten the belt. What I would say is we need to see some real accountability and transparency here, because if services are going to be cut, and you're trying to put all of us on the spot, as in to specify which service, well, let's look at it this way. There is those at the top of this establishment who seem to be doing very well. Now, I'm not attacking their salary, per se. What I'm saying is accountability, and if there's money to be saved, then why does that money seem to go up, whilst everything else has to suffer as a result?
Well, I'm not opposed to having a pop at the Vice-Chancellor over his salaries. I used every year to lecture the Vice-Chancellors and tell them that they should tighten their own belt before asking students to do so. But of course, that doesn't save money. I mean, it's token amount, it's very important, establishes a principle, sets the tone that the people at the top are willing to show economies, but of course, that doesn't save serious amounts of money. And if you are going to save serious amounts of money, you're going to have to run this as a much leaner administration with smaller overheads, smaller administration, making better use of the buildings. These are tough management tasks, and it has been done in many institutions. And as I said earlier, I think Glasgow has to some extent been shielded from the realities which are impinging on a lot of other institutions. And there will be hard choices. When I was in government, I hated it, but I had the responsibility of making major cuts in government departments. The government was bankrupt in 2010. It wasn't easy and it wasn't popular, but I made sure that I properly consulted everybody, that we went through a proper deliberative process. And one of the things I would want to do here is to make sure that when cuts do come in, you as a student body are absolutely fully integrated into the consultation, that it's not done over your heads.
Well, the rector's job is to represent the students, so I can't really answer for Peterson on what services he thinks should be cut, especially because he's wanting to listen to the students and represent them, and haven't expressed anything yet. But one thing that does cost money is campaigns and advertisement for things like the anti-bullying campaign, which is a bit silly. Things like that, it all costs money. You can take it away, you can put it into something else, find better use for it, like a practical use, other than posters telling people not to shout at each other.
I agree with Emma and Vince about that if there are to be cuts made, that they should be to the top university administration. But to give you a specific service that I think is, if it is subsidized by the university, it really shouldn't be, is the Army Center in next to the Botanics building or the Kelvin building. I'm not entirely sure why our university needs a center to recruit and train people for the military. I just don't see how it fits into the university's service to the country.
Well, based on John's background in policies, and to reiterate what's already been said, and I think is a really, really valuable point that's been brought up before, is to kind of reevaluate some of the potential overheads that might be brought in running the university in whatever capacity. And I think John, with his background, would be very interested in looking at particular things within the senior management and just going down to things like societies and working alongside all of those partners of the university to bring his experience to suggest things that could be cut. I think the way he would come at it, as opposed to a top-down cut or a loss of something, it would be a partnership and working with a particular organization to suggest potential things that aren't as effective as they could be, that might need funding withdrawn. But again, the great points that have been brought before, I think something that John would reiterate would be, before anything's made, to be transparent and to do full surveys to see what the student voice thinks and to always serve the student opinion.
I had been going to say simply that Lady Cosgrove and I did not discuss what services she was going to cut, as we were more focused on what she is going to do and how inclusive and tolerant she's going to be in the various ways in which she's going to do that. But since it's apparently the standard we're setting is this low, we would not see Lady Cosgrove cutting equality and diversity campaigns at this university.
Yeah, I agree with Sir Cable, Mr. Anwar. I agree with their views. I think if we have to make any cuts, then it should start from the top. I think university management would have to look at their salaries. If they want to make cuts, they shouldn't be cutting stuff for the students first. They should be cutting their salaries. That's what I think.
Okay, and now in response to, we've heard some more from candidates. Do we have any further questions from the audience, either to all candidates or to an individual candidate, if you could just specify? So we'll take one from the front row just here.
Hi. Oh, hello? Yeah, okay. So the rector is an important position, but there are also only one voice on the university court out of about, I think, 50. So it's important they can work with the other members of the university court to get things done. So how would your candidate work with the court to achieve their goals?
Yeah, you're right there, but I don't think you should just see it as one voice. The one voice works in conjunction with a body of between 26 to 30,000 students behind them. I think that's the first thing that the Senate needs to realize. The second issue is, of course, it's an important position and they should work in partnership. For me, over the last, 29 years, and especially over the last 17 years as a lawyer, I've worked in conjunction and in partnership with the Crown Office, with the police and authorities, and at times there's been cases where I've had to take them on, but I've also had to work in partnership with them. So sometimes you're working against, sometimes you're working with, but you build up a relationship of respect and in order to deliver the results at the end of the day. Now that's something that can be done at the Senate level, and I think what has been missing up until now for quite some time is the fact that the voice of the students is actually missing from the Senate, that it's not taken seriously. And that's because the position of the rector hasn't been taken seriously. And there hasn't been somebody there willing to stand up and to fight on behalf of the students. Now, I could run off a CV that could go on for the next 30 years if I wanted, but that's not the issue. The issue is practically, when you come up against the establishment, the authorities, how do you actually deliver the results? And I think that that's a concern here, because you can sit on committees all you want at the end of the day. But I know from experience that when I face the greatest tests in my professional career, whether it be, you know, in terms of racist murders taking place, the Scottish Stephen Lawrence, Surjit Singh Choka, when it's been in other scenarios when we've had to take on the UK government over the detention of mothers and children in Dungavel, where we fought a successful campaign to stop them being detained, and you take them on, and you have arrayed on the other side all the forces of the state, that sometimes in order to win that battle, you need to be able to show those people that you mean business, and actually you are taking it seriously because you've managed to mobilize and organize the students behind you to work not just with the students, because I think the staff at this university genuinely care about the students and want to work alongside them. So it's taking the staff and the students alongside and actually going to that Senate and saying, we have the backing. We have the backing of the movement, of the people, that the raison d'etre for this university being the students, and then convincing that Senate we all need to work together in partnership. I think that's possible. I think it's doable. I think we can win the arguments time and time again, but it's changing that culture, which has become one of top down, where they tell us what to think, where they tell the students this is what's going to happen, where they tell the students that's where the cutbacks are going to place, where they say, well, we'll give you tokenistic. Oh, if you ask for disabled access or this and that, sorry, you're not going to get it. If you ask for a 2% inflation rise every single year, as student unions and the SSC are going to ask for, you're not getting that. It's denial, denial, denial. Yet when they choose to want to increase money for whatever expenditure is, it's always there. And I think it's about exposing that and taking that back to the students and letting them know about it.
Thank you.
I think the first way to deal with the university court is to treat it with respect. I mean, these are people, there was a very good intervention from somebody early on who made the point that this is a very big, complex institution with a budget of 600 million, 22,000 students, thousands of staff. It's a massive organization, and whoever is the rector has got to get their head around that world, not resort to simple slogans or abuse or whatever. We've got to engage with them and take it seriously. And once you've got that respect, you can then fight for the student position. As it happens, I spent 5 years of my life in a government with people that I'd spent my whole life fighting. Didn't like them particularly, didn't have common political positions, but nonetheless, we were locked into an arrangement, and I fought my corner for 5 years and made sure that the priorities that I cared about and the people I was representing were properly manifested. And I think it's that combination of understanding and respecting the university as an institution and its court, and being willing to fight for your constituency, which in this case is the student body, that is the secret to having a good relationship with the court.
Peterson has a very good understanding of how a university works and the best way of communicating with people both high up in the uni and below, and to students, because he worked at Harvard at first, and now he works at the University of Toronto, which is most of his adult life has been within this system, and he knows it inside out, and it won't take him very long to adjust to the way it is in Glasgow, in England. Scotland, Great Britain.
So the question was about how to work with the university court. Like I said earlier, the rector is a part-time position, and so it's essential that the rector has a good working relationship with the SRC and works alongside them. I think it's also that the rector has a lot of opportunities to be with the court outside of meetings. That includes at these dinners. I mean, I can't honestly say I have the funds or the proper clothes to show up at one of these, but those are opportunities to get to know the court better and to work with them. By showing up at freshers' addresses and graduations and events where the university comes together, the rector can show, the rector can show to the university court that they're serious about this, And the university court, I think, will want to work with somebody who puts in all that time to being with students, being there for the university, and being a face for this great place.
So I think, to really hold your own on such a meeting like in court, John could potentially bring experience from representing both himself and the views of others from what he's done before in the Scottish and European parliaments. He's worked a lot with that in a youth capacity of representing the views of his peers and young people to very large professional groups, which I'm sure you could draw some similarities with the position at the university. And I think for someone to find success in getting their views across would have the confidence and the experience in knowing how to represent the views correctly. And I think that's what John has the experience to bring. And through doing so, I think he'll be able to actively, as I mentioned before, integrate between the different bodies, students and the societies and everything from every way a student could live or group they could be in to represent that effectively, building on his past experience.
You're right to say that the rector is only one voice on court, but they're also the chair, and it's less about the actual person as so much as about the political kind of sway that they can exert, the persuasion that they can convey, and the influence that they can have. And I think Lady Cosgrove, as a lawmaker, has spent her life sort of inhabiting that.
I agree with the vast majority of the candidates here. I think, obviously, yeah, it's right that the rector needs to get the respect of university court. I think I might have lost a bit of that during things that I've said already. But I think also, I think we need to have a rector who will stand up more for the students' thoughts. I think we need to try and find a system where we can get away, where we can quickly find out what students are thinking on certain issues. So if we used Moodle or Student Voice or something to find out quick petitions, what people think about certain issues, so you can take it to university court with you. I think in terms of like being one voice of 50, you are, but you've also got the support of the SRC behind you, who are a very strong body on campus. And I think that is all I've got to say.
Okay, so we take some further questions from the audience. So we'll take one just here. So fourth row just here.
So I have a question for the Peterson campaign. Given the fact that you say his campaign is about free speech, will Peterson come out and condemn Milo Yiannopoulos' promise to, if he was elected, ban the Muslim and the feminist societies? Or does he only care about free speech when it's to do with trans people?
Yeah, no one on the campaign, and Peterson himself, does not agree with banning the Muslim society. There's no reason to do it. They're perfectly, obviously, they're very safe to be around. They don't pose a threat to the LGBT community. They have every right to meet up and express their opinions. I don't know where this idea is coming from, that we only support freedom of speech for people we agree with. I don't understand the source of that. Also, about the feminist society, we weren't aware he proposed to ban that. So, obviously, we disagree with that as well.
Okay, can I show of hands for further questions? Okay, I think we'll go further back, just over there.
Hello. So I had a question for Mr. Anwar regarding his proposal on rent control. So as you probably know, economics is quite clear that if you enforce lower prices, what you are going to get is a reduce in the supply of accommodation, which would solve one problem by creating another one. I would like to know your opinion on maybe trying to push to repeal the HMO licenses, which are currently making landowners to rent flats to two people that could be rented for 3, just in order to avoid all the restrictions that license impose. And I wanted to know why you are focusing on a solution that is quite conspicuously suboptimal when there are better options available. Thank you.
Yeah, I think when you, for all the candidates, I think to be fair, when you discuss issues in the manifesto, you give sound bites of what the central issues of concern are. But I've mentioned rent control, and I don't think it's a case of that one issue means that the other issue isn't important. I mentioned, for instance, the fact that private landlords, private housing bodies are buying up huge swathes of lands in Glasgow. They're bringing in international foreign students. They're aggressively marketing them. They're putting rents out that well above the market rate, and they're exploiting foreign students. They're segregating them from the student population. On top of that, the question of rent control, I don't see why rent control shouldn't be introduced. And when the word economics is used with the greatest respect, quite often we get a government that for the last several years has used that word. Oh, well, you need to tighten your belt. Oh, well, it's not going to work because of economics. But as we've seen time and time again, when the money's there and they want to use it, they will use it. They will use it for Trident. They will use it for anything else that they want to waste their money on, right? So when it comes down to this is about humanity. This is about understanding the fact that 10% rises in rents in the West End are not affordable for students, right? And the fact for those landlords who are unscrupulously making a lot of money out of students, there's no requirement for them to be able to do that because those prices of properties are not going up by 10% every year. The expenses are not going up. Inflation has been held. I don't see why they should be charging an extra 10%. And then if that student's unwilling to pay, they say, right, we're turfing you out. There's been other places where rent pressure zones have been brought in and they've been shown to work. And it's not a question of saying economics. I quite frankly see it as this. It's not a question of me worrying about the landlord that might own 100 properties in the West End and makes a nice, tidy, very good profit off the back of students who have to work 1 or 2 jobs, but actually looking at the fact that, well, their rent will still be protected, but it's actually ensuring that that student doesn't suffer. Now, on the question of HMO licenses, I don't think you can conflate the two issues because HMO licenses were bought for a whole number of reasons, but there are many HMO licenses that exist still within the West End and operate. And those landlords are still increasing rents and still continue to do so. And what we're seeing also in terms of the building of properties is that I think the university needs to wake up to the fact that just because it's private developers that come in and buying whole swathes of lands, when will the university get together with Glasgow City Council and the Scottish Government and say, this cannot go on? There needs to be affordable housing. Students need to be part of the community. They need to live alongside each other. There needs to be resources and facilities that are built that will actually help students and the local community rather than multi-million-pound entities coming in and profiteering off the back of students.
Okay, so we will now take a question just down centre aisle, just here.
The university has been working more and more within the LGBTQ+ community on campus. And while there has been a great number of efforts to improve situations for LGBTQ+ students, there's still much to do. What specific initiatives would you implement to ensure that the whole LGBTQ+ community continues to be supported within the university? And this is to everyone.
Well, I think the LGBTQ+ society does an absolutely fantastic job on campus. I'm gay myself, so obviously I've had experiences with that society. The first thing that I've suggested already is that I want to increase the amount of gender-neutral toilets on campus. I think there's no argument against having gender-neutral toilets in every building. It's not like we're replacing all the toilets in every building with a gender-neutral one. It's just having one that people can feel comfortable using. I think a second way we can improve for the LGBT society is maybe having a rector meeting with them maybe once a month, maybe once every 2 months, just seeing what their current things that they're talking about, the campaigns they want the rector to promote, and stuff like that. So working closely with the LGBTQ+ society to get their voice heard on the university court.
Is it going to come up? Okay. I think that working with the excellent LGBTQ+ society is definitely a way to go, but I think something that Lady Cosgrove is quite committed to doing is that making sure that equality and diversity and inclusivity is reflected in the learning and teaching environments as well. So an increase in staff training around sort of equality and diversity with particular focus on pronouns and gender inclusivity, and feeding into the development as well, making sure that promises that are set out in the design standards, such as gender neutral toilets, are actually delivered on.
As I outlined in the talk at the start, one thing that John's really keen to do is to do a lot of surveying, speak to students and integrate with societies. And in supporting the LGBTQ+ community that exists in Glasgow, John would be very keen to meet with people to understand the needs of this community and take advice from people around him of exactly what needs to be done in that. This is an example of an issue that John is aware of, and that he would be the advice from others around him would be particularly valuable of. Gender neutral toilets is something that, a really good point has already been raised, that he would be very, very passionate about implementing to make sure that every building or within every different building that you could be in a university, that option is there, so that at no point throughout your day at university, any individual student should feel put under pressure to, or be made uncomfortable. But the bottom line is it would come down from listening to the student bodies, particularly those that represent LGBTQ+ students, to take their advice on what to do.
I agree with the other candidates that the university should have more gender-neutral toilets, and it should do everything that it can to make LGBTQ+ people more welcome and more included on campus. As a rector, I would make sure that I consulted with the LGBTQ+ society and with any other students who aren't part of that club, but are part of that community, or identify with one of those communities. Yeah, I would just make sure that that whatever their concerns and their thoughts and their ideas come forward to University Court through the rector and through the SRC.
One thing that Peterson argued against when he was discussing Bill C-16 was the concept of grouping lots of people together and saying that they all have the same opinion. There are people within our campaign, and I know people personally, who have become disillusioned with the LGBTQ society and have had to leave because they didn't feel like their views were welcome there. So that's quite an important thing to remember when speaking about a community as such. It's made up of individuals. And another thing is at Glasgow University, we're all very tolerant and we're all very welcoming of people here, and I think that needs to be remembered. We're not all, it's quite a tolerant place to be. We've come a long way. We're a good place, yeah.
I mean, the obvious point is that in recent years, LGBT issues have been properly recognized in a way that was not the case before. I was proud of the fact that I was involved in the campaign to legalize gay marriage, and it has now happened, and it's established both sides of the border in law, and that's absolutely right. I think that the job of the rector here is to try to ensure that where people are subjected to homophobic abuse, and it still happens, just as with racial abuse and other forms of discrimination, that there is a proper system, that there's somebody that they can go to for support, legal protection if necessary, and that the university has the structures to do it. I've never been subject to homophobic. I'm not gay, as it happens. But one of the things I did experience a lot when I first came to this city, I had a multiracial family. My wife was Indian. And we did experience quite a lot of hostility from time to time. I mean, in many ways, Glasgow is a lovely city and people are very warm and supportive, but there are some who are not. And what was the most difficult way of handling it was the loneliness of not knowing that there was somebody you could go to for support and help. And I think for people who now experience discrimination and abuse of a homophobic variety, the important thing is to have the structures so that you know there are people who will back you up.
Yeah, I'm glad to say that I need to echo what everybody else has said, apart from Professor Peterson's representative. I think that the issues need to still be taken seriously. Sometimes it feels as though that everybody pays these issues lip service, but in reality they don't actually follow it through. So it's almost become trendy to say, oh, we'll go on the Pride demonstration, oh, we back the LGBTQI community, but actually, in reality, the reality for many of these students is that they still suffer harassment, they still suffer abuse, they're still treated as second-class citizens, they still are subjected to discrimination in their classes or on the streets or in the flats, or when they go into clubs or when they go into coffee places or wherever it is, right? And some of these students feel as though, like I've said before, about suffering in silence. That should not happen. And when Professor Peterson's representative, and to be fair, he's not here, but when she says that we've come a long way, I don't think we've come a long way enough. As long as people from that community and others still abused, still discriminated against, still raped, still killed, still spat on, and treated like that, then we have not come a long way enough. There is much more that requires to be done, and this university needs to step up and needs to start working. I, for one, worked with the Thai campaign, and the reason why I took that on board was quite simple, because I saw the fact that they were wanting to introduce inclusive education into schools across this country, and the fact for me was, what was revealed was the fact that young people were still taking their lives because they happened to come from the LGBTQI community. And I thought one life being lost was too much, and that the government in this country needed to step up, our MSPs needed to step up, the society needed to step up and realize that if they actually care about our children, then surely they should put aside their own personal beliefs, religious beliefs, whatever it may be, however difficult it be, because they want to save lives. Well, I think at this university, I think it's about time we stop playing tokenistic responses and playing lip service to equality, but actually started delivering some real practical issues that will make a difference to these people's lives. And of course, there are those that require support and they're not getting it, and mental health services and other services need to require that. And I also think that we should be pulling in other bodies that actually have the experiences onto campus and actually, deliver the campaigns, but with practical steps. And for the university, I don't know the last time the university actually, delivered on any of these issues. It's been left to the student societies themselves to do it. It's a responsibility. It's part of the Equality Act. It's part of the, if you're going to be anti-discriminatory, then the university has to actually deliver on that. And I know from having spoken to students over the last couple of weeks, but over the last few years, some of the problems that they still continue to experience are absolutely shocking. So if I was rector, I would be wanting those problems that those students experience to actually be revealed on campus so people could see we are still sometimes living in the dark ages, and that needs to change.
Okay, we're now drawing to a close. Do we have further questions? We'll take one just up towards the back there.
Can you hear me? So I would like to ask specifically, there's been a lot of talk about mental health and raising awareness and giving support, but there's not been a lot of talk about mental health and the impact it has on student studies. So specifically, two questions. How will you increase feedback, seeing as students aren't given feedback on exams, for instance, or oftentimes very late? And what will you do to help students who have mental health concerns and are facing struggles finishing their studies or have issues with good cause and so on when they haven't been able to meet with psychological services because they're so overcrowded? How will you help those students specifically? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. During my time at university, feedback was one of the main concerns that me and a lot of my friends had. We didn't get it for quite a long time. I think the SRC are working on a way to improve the speed that students get feedback, but I do agree that I think feedback should be back to students within 2 weeks. I don't think it's good enough to keep students waiting up to 5 or 6 weeks to find out results, which could impact upon how much work they have to do for certain exams and how they prioritize their work. So I agree that we need to sort out a way to get feedback better. In terms of students with mental health issues struggling to finish their exams or stuff. I've said in my manifesto that I think the good cause system at the moment is not up to standard. The fact that people have to pay up to £20 to get a certificate to say that they have a good cause just isn't good enough. I think we need to sort out a way where students can go to the SRC and tell them that they're struggling with their studies, or go to a counsellor if we improve our mental health service and tell them they're struggling with their studies. And by putting in these systems that they can have time off their assessments or have extensions be put on, and then when they've got through some of those stages, or when the extension has happened, then they can go to a doctor to get that good cause certificate. I think it adds extra stress having to go to a doctor when you're already struggling with mental health issues, and then be told you've got to pay £20 for this certificate. You might not get it. So I think we need to have a big discussion about that. But I don't know the definite answers at the moment, but I'll definitely work on it if you vote JJT's #1 rector.
I think that big improvements could be made to the impact that poor mental health has on students' studies if the service had a bit more to do with our academic processes and with the learning and teaching environment. And so I think that were Lady Cosgrove to be elected, and to review the efficiency of the current counselling and psychological services, I think that that would be something to look at.
So mental health was one of the really big points of John's campaign, and within that it was conducting a thorough review of the service as it currently stands, and not just looking at ways to give it more money, but looking at ways within it to make structural changes. Firstly, to make it maybe hiring more staff to make more appointments easier to get. And this is something that John wanted to bring from his personal experience of issues that he felt with the service, such as, that you have so many appointments and that's it, and having to go back to the start. So I think for John's perspective, I can give quite a broad answer to that question, to say that the service as a whole would be reviewed so that the whole service can support issues of good cause and supporting the studies, and as it's been previously mentioned, bringing this and integrating this more with the academic side of the university too.
So in answer to the first question, I believe that the rector not only represents undergrads, but also represents postgrads. They represent the entire student body. And I think it is very important that assignments are returned in a timely manner, but I also know that for a lot of postgrad students who are also marking papers, that's a big commitment. And so I think 3 weeks is a fair compromise between the people who have to mark papers and people who have to return them. But that's something, that 3 weeks is something that, as rector, I would make sure that that the relevant people on the university court who are in charge of enforcing that are aware if those things are being, if people aren't handing assignments back in time. As far as mental health on campus, this is a really important issue for students, and it's, university is a big time in people's lives where they're figuring out who they are, and that a lot of times that brings issues, and so I would be working alongside the SRC's mental health officer, and hearing from them what they think is the best course of action for the university to take on this issue.
As I mentioned earlier, the self-authoring program developed by Peterson and 3 other psychologists includes a program called the Future Authoring Program, in which students and anyone else really is asked to write about what they want for the future, what would happen if their future went drastically wrong, and how they can avoid going down that path. This would be, Peterson's wanting to develop this into something which is more applicable to students in particular, which would be available online as part of a wider mental health program. This has had, as I've said before, this has had massive impact on universities which have implemented the Future Authoring program, including one in Canada, which it it removed the dropout in first year. No students dropped out within their first year, and failing students' marks increased 25%, which is quite astounding. That's like a pragmatic plan with evidence that we know works, which could be implemented in our university for free.
I think there are certain very specific, concrete things that need to be done. The first is that the waiting lists here are far too long. If people are kept waiting weeks and months to see a psychologist, what become mild anxiety can degenerate into a breakdown. So you've got to have the ability for people to see someone quickly and get the waiting list right down to the minimum. I think the second, there's a particular problem, I think, with first years. I think particularly in Scotland, because of the Scottish higher system, people come to university younger than elsewhere in the UK. There is quite a difficult transition in many cases, and in order to prevent problems happening for younger students, I think a system whereby older undergraduates are available to act as mentors, supporters, designated individuals, I think, can head off quite a lot of difficulty. Then thirdly, we already have a system where if you have learning difficulties, say dyslexia, allowances are made in exam conditions. This system is sufficiently flexible to take your concerns on board, and I would hope that mental health is dealt with in a similar way. I think the final point I would make is a more general one. I've already explained, my own family's history, and my mother's in particular, and brought home to me how devastating untreated mental illness can become. One of the first jobs I ever did was as a mental health nurse, as it happens. And you do see the consequences of the fact that mental health is the bottom of the priorities in our health service. It's the Cinderella service, and it's long been the case. And in universities, at the very least, we should be trying to correct that bias and make sure that the seriousness of it is recognized and there are systems in place to deal with it.
I'm glad that there appears to be, for people on the panel who are standing for Rector, a consensus on this issue. Mental health remains a taboo subject, not just in the university, but also in wider society. I think that the appointment system is chronic. It's falling apart. The fact that sometimes students can be waiting up to 3 months for appointments, quite frankly, is ridiculous, because God only knows what those students are doing in those 3 months. Then they might be on the verge of suicide. They might have all sorts of problems. They might have been subjected to abuse. They might have been harassed. They might have been raped. What exactly are they supposed to do in that time period as they wait for the appointment? So I think that needs to be changed. The second issue as well, I think, is a case of, I don't claim to be the sole expert on mental health. I've not chaired any mental health welfare commission, but what I can say is that as a lawyer, I have seen over the course of the last 2 decades the practical impact of mental health. I have dealt with individuals who have committed suicide. I've dealt with individuals who, as a result of child abuse, as a result of rape, have gone on to commit crimes. I've dealt with individuals who've been locked up when the system would have been better to provide them drug rehabilitation, to provide them rehabilitation, to find another way of option of dealing with them. And I've had to deal with a system for many years that is more sympathetic to locking people up than it is to actually dealing with those with mental health issues. So I've seen at the other side of it, not from the top, but actually on the ground, individuals and the impact that mental health has on them. And that's why it's one of the issues that I did raise in my manifesto. And I think it's important that at this stage, whoever becomes rector takes on the practices and the experiences of other bodies that can assist, and sets up an immediate working group that will work not just with the students and ask them what their problems are, but bring in other agencies together and set a target and a timescale that says that these are the conclusions and this is what we want as a student body, and take it to the Senate and say, what are you going to do? Because as I said, it is unacceptable if one person loses their life or one person is driven to drink, alcohol, drugs, whatever addiction it is, and pushed over the edge, or just simply drops out of university because it comes too much. More and more students are actually doing that. This is supposed to be a place that you come to learn, to mix with other people from other communities, to break down barriers, and to enjoy yourself. To have some joy and to have lifelong experiences and build lifelong friendships. And I think sometimes and increasingly it seems to be that seems to be forgotten. It's almost become like some sort of factory line of production that students have become, rather than realizing actually, you know, students will leave this university and give their life experiences to others, and it's valuable if we treat them valuably and treat them as human beings, and we treat them with respect. And that means everybody at this university, anybody who ever has a problem, shouldn't be treated and suffering in silence and treated as though it's a taboo subject. And we don't have the time and we don't have the money. We do have the time and we should have the money for it.
Okay, and we'll take one last question just from the back.
Hi, David Patterson, Glasgow Guardian. I've got a message from Twitter saying, Benjamin DC to Anwar. As you defend corrupt MPs, he means Michelle Thompson and Natalie McGarry, what is your position on university corruption?
Let me be just quite blunt with you, young man. I'm a solicitor, right? And I observe the rules of professional conduct. I do not comment on clients' cases or individual cases in public unless those individuals want me to comment on them. So that's the first step. If you want to talk about individual cases, why don't you talk about the Choker case? A family who fought for justice for 17 years. Why don't you talk about Emil Caldwell, a family whose case I'm fighting for, you know, a woman who was murdered in Glasgow some over 10 years ago, a decade ago? Why don't you talk about Sheku Bayo's case, a young man who died in police custody after being detained by 9 police officers in Fife and Kirkcaldy? Why don't you talk about the hundreds of other cases? And we have, fortunately, a system in this country which is called the system of justice, which I'm sure Lady Cosgrove's representative would also agree with, which is supposed to be one of the finest in the world, where we have a judge, we have a prosecution, and we have a defense, and we have a presumption of innocence. And on that basis, individuals are dealt with that, and at the end of those cases, individuals, if they are tried, and whether they're found guilty or innocent, that's the system that we believe in. And I work as a defense lawyer, but I also sometimes work on the other side as well, and work with the Crown and the police to get justice for families and for individuals. That's my job. I'm proud of it. I gave you the background of why I've done it and why I've done it for years, and I will continue to do so. So I will make no apologies for what I do. On the question of corruption at university, if you have evidence of corruption at university, then absolutely it should be exposed. If you have concrete evidence of corruption at university, then rather just saying there's corruption at university, produce the evidence, take it to the police, and I'm sure that Police Scotland will investigate it, as they are doing at the moment, for instance, with the Conservative Party, who seems to have a mountain of cases against them, and the CPFs have been presented a file. So go ahead, do it if there's actual evidence, but there's no point in standing in a public meeting accusing the university of corruption unless you've actually got the evidence.
Okay, and we'll take one final question. Okay, we'll go to the front.
If you had to support a candidate other than yourselves, who would you support?
Yeah, I've been very open about this already. I would support Mr. Anwar. I think he's an absolutely fantastic candidate. I like his passion for the university and for the students, and I think he will stand up for people on court, and I think he's a very valid candidate for rector.
I have to say the same, Amar Anwar. Partners in Justice, Lady Cosgrove and Amar Anwar.
Again, it's just something that is more, with John not being here, this has to be more of a personal reflection, and it shouldn't really base your vote on him, but I think that based on the proactive image of a female rector, Lady Cosgrove would be a fine candidate.
If I had a vote in this and a second vote, I would vote for Amar Anwar.
I can't speak for anyone else on my campaign, but I'd vote for Cosgrove.
Well, I think Lady Cosgrove wins because she has my vote too. And not because I know her, but because she's standing up for gender equality. Very important issue. There are many areas that need to be addressed. The one I put at the top of my list of priorities was proper representation in STEM, but she's made that a major theme of her campaign, and I support her.
I think that's a difficult question because I do want to be the rector. Right? I'm passionate about it. I'm committed to it. I do have a lifetime dedicated to fighting inequality and injustice. And my life changed at this university. And I'm grateful to that, to what happened to me at this university. And I want to feed back some of that. And I live locally. I am the candidate who has been here every single day for 2 weeks. I haven't sent representatives along to speak on my behalf. I'm there from morning to evening, every single day, to show students that this is how I mean to go on. And if I had to choose, I think sometimes people like to present their CVs and present themselves, whether they be lawyers, whether they be government ministers, whether they be high court judges, or whether they be professors. And sometimes what we lose out in this fact is that sometimes youth is a valuable commodity. And I have to say that one of the people that spoke, there's been a lot of good stuff being said here tonight, and I welcome that. I don't think, fortunately, we've not had the conflict that was to be expected. We haven't had the idiots and the morons turn up tonight. But in terms of youth, I have to say that some of the best common sense I've heard all night is from that young man sitting on the end there.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So now I will ask each of the candidates if any of you have any closing remarks. Very briefly, please, but if you could just extend them just now.
Why do you always start with my end? Yeah, just to say that a lot of people mention gender and gender equality. It seems to me as though it's just become a soundbite. You know, the fact is that I don't think this university still has dealt with the fact that University Guardian did a survey and that 1/3 of students had experienced sexual harassment. 63% don't feel that they can report harassment. 43% still believe that lad culture is widespread. You know, in terms of sexual assault and the question of rape is still very much a live issue. That whilst we might have lighting on campus, that off campus, a lot more needs to be done by Glasgow City Council, and that students and female students need to feel safer and not be targeted and not to feel as though that the attacks and the assaults of them are something that can just be taken as, you know, I think as Milo said, oh, well, it's just a bit of groping and they should just grow up and move on, right? So that's the first issue. I'd say that actual practical steps need to be taken immediately by the university. It's not going to cost them a lot of money. It could actually be implemented straight away, and action needs to be taken against those that choose to cross the line, which in other areas outside this university will be considered to be criminal conduct. And the last thing I would want to say is that following Donald Trump, following Brexit, it seems as though the clock has been turned back and a green light given for misogynists, for racists, for Islamophobes and homophobes to attack. Across Europe, mainstream politicians have engaged with ideas that once were considered to be relegated to the margins of fascism. You've got immigrants, LGBTI, you've got Muslims, you've got minorities that are portrayed as threatening a civilized way of life. And I would urge you all as students to recognize this, because we are living in dangerous times. No student can afford to be complacent. We have to do all we can to rid ourselves of this poison. And what I would say to you finally is that in this position of rector, anybody that says it's a symbolic position, it is not a symbolic position. It is not about being the first female rector. It is not about being the first Muslim rector. It is not even about being the first Asian rector. What counts is whether that rector is going to stand up and fight for all students, regardless of their sex, their gender, their sexuality, their race, or their religion. Because if that rector simply comes in and disappears into this lovely hall, or sitting over there with the principal, or goes into the ceremonial dinners but actually doesn't pop up again and isn't there every week or every fortnight for the students and making themselves available. I don't mean 2 hours turning up next week to say, hi, kiss my babies, give me my vote, as some politicians do, but actually genuinely being there for the students. Then it's going to make no blind bit of difference. And what I'm saying to you is that if you vote for me, then I promise you 100% I will fight on behalf of the students of this university and the staff and for the reputation of Glasgow University.
The reason I responded positively when a group of students asked me to stand was this. I had some of the best years of my life in this city. I studied here. I learned to teach economics. I represented one of the poorest wards in the city, Maryhill, on the council, and learnt about social justice and inequality and how you fight for it. And I'm now in a position to put something back, and that's why I've come up here and I want to do that. And the question is, what can I contribute? I think what I can contribute above all is a very deep understanding of how universities work. I oversaw British universities for 5 years. This is a massive institution involving large amounts of money, large amounts of people. It's got to be properly managed. And there's got to be somebody there who sees that from the perspective of the students. And that is the role I would take up. I've heard the audience tonight. It's a great meeting. I get a very strong sense of the importance you attach to it. I would treat this very seriously as a working rector, but also somebody who is communicating political values around the issues which are surfacing in Brexit and the rest. But I can't do that without your support. So I would ask you if you would support me in this ballot. Thank you.
Freedom of speech is one of our most fundamental rights. It's what keeps our society functioning and allows us to articulate problems and find a solution to them. And is, no matter what your opinions are, or your beliefs, or what political party you vote for, or what causes you may support, fundamentally, freedom of speech allows us to be well informed and to be inquisitive and to, maybe the opinion that we are silencing could be the right opinion. I think as university students, it should be one of the most treasured rights that we have. It doesn't seem to be so much anymore. And with regards to mental health, is a lot of candidates seem to want to lobby and protest and complain, but they don't have their own plans in order to set out improved mental health and have evidence to prove that what their plans are work. Our candidate has that, so.
I think, as we heard from Imran Anwar earlier, that there really is a growing want at the university for a young rector, for somebody who understands the university experience as it is now, and that's what I'm running on. I agree with a lot of what these candidates say, and it's great to see some really good candidates that are running for a working rector platform. But it's time now to go back to when we could elect rectors who are students and who are on that age, and that's something in my manifesto that I want to work towards is changing the university regulation that students can't be rectors. And so, for now, I'm the closest that you can get, and so I'd appreciate your vote on Monday. Thank you.
So for John Lundberg, his campaign was built around bringing his past experience as a student at the university, as well as his experience in politics, to the role of rector, to give the best, strongest, most experienced attack possible. And one of his main priorities would be supporting a review of the mental health services at the university. And after the discussion that's come up tonight, particularly raising issues of mental health that's come up and those within the LGBTQ+ community, I think these are things that could really be brought in to that review of the mental health to make sure that everyone at the university is supported regardless of whatever particular factors about them, and everyone has the same level of good quality support that I think John could bring through a review and financial boost to the mental health services.
Just to close for Lady Cosgrove, I thought I might extend her apologies. I don't think anybody's more disappointed than her than that she can't be here. And she's not here because of a long-standing commitment. And so I just thought I might throw it in there that that's the same commitment she would bring to this role were she elected. That's how she treats her commitments. It's been quite a difficult thing to represent someone, to speak on their behalf. And I just thought I might also say that I don't regret doing it. I think I really do feel strongly about this candidate. I feel very passionate about this candidate. You're right to say that it's not about being the only female candidate, it's about being the best, but why can't you be both? And sometimes it is about the first female rector, because we live in a patriarchy. Thanks.
I still can't get over the fact Miss Anwar thinks I'd be a good rector, but I genuinely think the next rector of this university should be a recent graduate who really cares about this university. I love this university from the bottom of my heart, and if I'm voted rector, I will do my best to represent the students on court. But I do think even if you are going to vote me number one, or you just think I'm a twat with shite hair, just make sure you get out and vote. Tell all your friends to go out and vote, because it's really important that we get a working rector at this university who will stand up for the students on this campus. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of our speakers and representatives here this evening, and thank you very much to everyone that has come along tonight. So we've heard from candidates and representative speakers who've outlined their objectives going forward. Voting will now open on Monday at 9 AM and close at 4 PM next Tuesday. Voting will be conducted online, and only current fully registered students at the university will be eligible to vote. The announcement of the election result will take place in Boyd Or Lecture Theatre 1 at 5 PM on Tuesday. Please remember to look over candidate manifestos once again. These are available on the SRC website at glasgowstudent.net. And again, if there's any other aspects of a particular candidate's campaign that you wish to look over between now and the election, you can find out further information via their social media campaign pages. This marks a very important time within the university's history. With the £1 billion campus development project underway, changes across the higher education sector, funding issues, and Brexit about to commence to the next stage, the importance of having a rector that will be a strong voice for the student community is truly tantamount. The 3-year term of office for rector is finite, but it's almost a lifetime in student years. Ensure you express your view in the upcoming election by casting your vote for the candidate you believe best placed to take this role forward for the next 3 years. Once again, please extend a thank you to all of our candidates. Sorry. And again, thank you to everyone here for taking part in this process. Thank you and good night.